Hey everyone, and welcome back. We're diving into something today that I think will really resonate with a lot of you. It's this whole idea of what really supports us, after we hit that 60 mark. And
it's funny you should say that because
yeah.
you actually sent over this video called 6 Pillars of Reliable Support After 60.
Yeah, right.
And it really got me thinking differently about what it means to feel truly secure and happy.
Yeah,
as we
it
get
totally
older.
did for me too. And, we talk a lot on this show about building a good life, as we age. And I think most of us kind of assume family is
Right.
going to be that, main support system.
That's right.
But this video kind of challenges that assumption pretty intriguing ways.
Yeah, what really struck me is how it almost pushes back against this automatic assumption that family is always going to be our
Right.
main safety net. I mean, don't get me wrong, family is absolutely
course,
essential. But this whole idea of relying on them as our only source of support, the video makes some really compelling
It
arguments
does. It's
against
like,
that.
what if they can always be there, in the way that
Right.
we expect? And it's not even about them not loving us. It's just,
Right.
life throws
Yeah.
curveballs. People, have their own journeys.
Exactly. And that's where this whole idea of the 6 pillars that the video talks about
Right.
comes in. It's almost like building this, multifaceted support system.
Yeah.
So we're not putting all of our eggs in one basket, so to speak.
Okay, I'm hooked. Let's unpack these pillars. The first one, and they don't mess around, the video just comes right out and says, it is financial stability. And they're pretty blunt about it. They say, money, not a person, is the most reliable support you will ever have.
It's a bold statement.
Kind of a bold statement, right?
It is, but when you
Yeah.
really think about it, having your finances in order provides this incredible sense of freedom and security, and it also lessens the need to rely on others.
Especially as we age.
As we age, yeah. Absolutely. But what I love is that they don't just, say
Right.
save money, like some
Right.
generic advice. They tell this story about
yeah.
Richard. This 72-year-old man who always assumed that his kids would help him financially, if he needed it, because he had helped them a ton. So it just seemed like a natural
Reciprocity.
reciprocity.
We kind of
yeah.
assume.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
then families.
When some
What's
unexpected
that?
medical bills popped up, he discovered that his kids were actually dealing with their own financial struggles.
So,
And it
wow.
wasn't that they didn't want to help their dad; they just couldn't.
They couldn't.
Yeah.
Wow, that's got to be a hard
is.
realization. And it really highlights how, this isn't about
Right.
being rich. It's about having
It's
that
about being
safety
prepared.
net for yourself.
So what does that look
Yeah.
like
So-
practically? Because I'm sure people listening right now
Yeah.
are thinking like, oh gosh, I haven't really given much thought to this.
That's such a good question, and it's something
Yeah.
that comes up a lot. And honestly, this is where I get really excited talking about those nitty-gritty details. Because first of all,
Right.
don't panic. It's never too late to
Absolutely.
take control. The video mentions having emergency
Okay.
savings. A steady income source, even if it's part-time, And really good money
Those
management.
management skills seem key.
They are. It's one thing to have money. It's another to know how to make it last and stretch.
And there are resources for that, right?
There's tons of resources. Websites, financial advisors who specialize in retirement planning.
Okay.
Even workshops at
Oh, cool.
community centers. Yeah, it's just about finding what works
Okay,
for
so
you.
pillar number 1, financial stability. Check.
Check.
But the video doesn't stop there. They go on to say that even with money, physical health is non-negotiable for independence after 60.
And this one's interesting because they really emphasize personal responsibility. They say straight up, nobody can take care of your health for you. It's on
That's
you.
kind of harsh, but true. It's true, and
It's
it makes
true.
me think about the story they share about Carl, 68.
Oh, yeah.
And he basically thought, I'll get back in shape later, after he retired. But then everyday tasks became difficult, and his lack of mobility started impacting his life. And his kids, while supportive, couldn't be there 24/7.
It's such a good point because, Carl's story is a reminder that we can't outsource our well-being. It's easy to fall into that trap of thinking, well, my loved ones will pick up the slack. But that's just a recipe for resentment and burnout on their
their
end.
support should be a bonus, not a crutch.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and we need to, show up for ourselves first. That's right. And you know what I found encouraging about this section is that they really emphasize the power of those small, consistent effort. We don't need to become marathon runners overnight. It's about, moving our bodies daily, even if it's a walk around the block, eating a bit healthier, not ignoring those
It's those little
pains.
habits that compound over time, right? That might not seem like much at the moment, but long term, huge.
Huge impact, exactly. We're talking sustainable habits, not temporary fixes. That's where true independence
Okay, this is
comes
making
from.
me rethink my approach a little bit. I'm not gonna lie. So we've got financial stability, physical health, but we are social creatures. And the video brings up loneliness as a real threat after 60. And it's not just about, feeling sad or isolated. This can actually impact our health and how long we live.
This one really resonated with me because we tend to think of loneliness as just an emotional state, but it really has, physiological effects too. And while family can provide companionship, they can't be our only source of connection, especially as our kids grow up. Yeah, they've got their own lives, families, and careers.
And this is where that story about Margaret really hit hard for me. She's in her 70s, and she kind of realized that she had become isolated, relying almost entirely on her sons for social interaction. And they love her dearly, but they're busy,
Right. And it's so easy to fall into that trap, especially as we get older. Our social circles might naturally shrink. People move away. People pass on. Life just takes different paths.
Absolutely. So what does she do?
Well, what Margaret did next is so inspiring. She got proactive. She reconnected with old friends. She joined a community gardening group because she'd always loved plants.
Oh, I love that.
And get this, she even started taking a painting class. I know, right? She basically created this whole new social ecosystem for herself.
Yeah, I bet that felt amazing.
And the video highlights how, those connections did more than just stave off loneliness. They gave her this renewed sense of purpose and belonging.
Wow.
Which,
we all
let's be
crave
honest,
that. Yeah, no matter what age we are. Absolutely.
At any age.
This is making me think about my own social life. Like, who are those people who bring me joy? Who could I reconnect with? Or what new communities could I explore?
Exactly. It's not about filling time. It's about that feeling of connection. About fostering a sense of belonging and purpose, which becomes so valuable as we age.
So I'm curious, when you think about, those joy-bringing connections, who comes to mind for you?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm already making a mental list.
But before we get too carried away, the video isn't done with us yet. No.
Not even close.
They go on to talk about the importance of having a sense of purpose. Which seems especially relevant after 60, right? Things like retirement or, kids leaving the nest can leave a little bit of a void.
Yeah, and what I love is how the video emphasizes that purpose really comes from within. It doesn't come from other people. It's not about someone giving you a purpose. It's about cultivating it yourself. It's about having that reason to get up in the morning, to engage with life, to feel like you're contributing something meaningful.
It reminds me of the story in the video about George, the retired engineer in his 70s.
I remember George.
Who was really excited about retirement at first, but then it kind of hit him like, wait a minute, feel a little lost.
And his kids were great, but they had their own lives. And he realized that he needed something more. Just leisure time.
More than just puttering around the house.
So what did he do?
He was so passionate about engineering, even in a retirement. So he decided to volunteer at a local school, teaching kids basic engineering principles.
And
let me tell you, the spark in his eyes when he talked about those kids, it was incredible.
That's so heartwarming. And it just shows how purpose can really evolve and take on new forms as we age. Like, it doesn't have to be tied to our careers or previous
it can
roles.
Be hobbies, learning a new skill, mentoring someone you know, even setting personal goals like learning a new language or traveling to a new place. It's about finding what lights you up and pursuing it with passion.
I love that this is making me think about my own sense of purpose, how it's definitely shifted over time, from, career goals to now, creative pursuits and building community. What about you? Well, it's definitely changed, but more importantly, it's made me realize that purpose is not this static thing, it's constantly evolving, and that's okay. It's about being open to new possibilities and finding those things that give us a reason to embrace.
I love that this conversation is already so insightful, and we're only halfway through the pillars. I can't wait to see what the video has in store for us next.
Me neither. We've got emotional resilience and adaptability to cover. And trust me, they're just as fascinating.
This is why I love these deep dives, so much to unpack and explore.
I know.
We'll be right back after a quick break to delve into those last two pillars. Okay, so we're back and ready to dig into these final two pillars from the 6 pillars of reliable support after 60 video. And we've already talked about financial stability, physical health, a good social circle, and having a sense of purpose. It's wild how just those 4 things already paint this picture of a really well-rounded life.
It really does. And it speaks to that idea we were talking about earlier of, building a support system from multiple angles, not putting all our eggs in one basket, so to speak. But the video doesn't stop there. It goes on to talk about emotional resilience as being this crucial
Yeah, this
pillar.
one's so important, and I feel like it often gets overlooked. We can have all the external support in the world, but if we don't have the inner strength to, handle life's curveballs, it can all kind of crumble.
Exactly. And the video doesn't sugarcoat it. It acknowledges that life after 60, it often involves loss, health challenges, shifts in our relationships, and as much as our loved ones want to be there for us, they can't always be our emotional
It's like we said
front.
earlier, their support should be like a bonus, not our only coping mechanism.
Exactly. And the video really highlights the danger of putting that kind of pressure on our families. It can lead to resentment on their end, and it can prevent us from developing our own emotional resilience.
And so then the question becomes, what does that actually look like? What does emotional resilience look like in practice? And they shared the story about Helen, this woman in her 70s who lost her husband after 40 years of marriage. And it's so heartbreaking, but it's also incredibly inspiring.
Oh, Helen's story is such a powerful one. She initially turned to her children for support, which is so natural, but she realized that they couldn't fill the void that she was feeling. They had their own lives, their own grief to process.
It must have been hard for her to kind of come to terms with that. But it sounds like it led her to really take ownership of her own emotional well-being.
It did. And, she joined a grief support group. She started journaling, and she really focused on finding strength within herself. It wasn't about, denying her pain. It was about learning how to move through it.
That takes so much courage. It's not about, being stoic or pretending that everything is okay. It's about having the tools to process those difficult emotions and come out on the other side. Strong.
You said it perfectly. Emotional resilience is about equipping ourselves to navigate all those ups and downs, knowing that we have that inner strength to weather whatever storms.
It makes me think about my own kind of go-to sources of strength. Sometimes it's journaling, sometimes it's just getting out in nature or listening to music that, really lifts my spirits. What about you? What are some of your sources of strength when things get tough?
Oh, I'm a big believer in mindfulness practices like meditation and deep breathing exercises. Those always help me to stay grounded and present, especially when I feel that anxiety creeping in. But sometimes, honestly, it's as simple as calling a good friend or taking a walk in the park. It's really about finding what works for you and making it a regular part of your life.
Yeah, this whole conversation is really making me realize that emotional resilience isn't like a destination. It's an ongoing journey of self-discovery and growth, and it's never too late to start that journey.
Couldn't agree more. And that brings us to that final pillar, the one that kind of ties everything together beautifully. Adaptability.
This one feels so relevant as we get older, because let's be honest, life after 60, it's often a whirlwind of changes, Our health changes, our relationships change, our circumstances change.
And what's interesting is that the video actually cautions against clinging to the past or resisting change. It really emphasizes that adaptability is essential not just for surviving, but for thriving in later life.
It's like that saying, the only constant is change. Fighting against it just creates more suffering. The key is to kind of learn to ride the waves.
Beautifully put. And the video shares this great story about a man named Frank who's in his late 70s. And he was so used to having a very active social life, mostly in person. But as his friends started moving away or passing on, he started to feel
Yeah,
isolated.
and that's such a common experience as we age. Our social circles, they just naturally shift and evolve. But it sounds like Frank didn't let that defeat him.
He didn't. Instead of giving up, he decided to adapt. He learned how to use video calls to stay connected with his family and friends who live far away. He joined online book clubs and even started taking virtual cooking classes.
Virtual cooking classes, that's amazing. I never would have thought of that.
I know, right? It just shows how adaptability isn't just about coping with change. It's about discovering new possibilities. It's about expanding our horizons. And Frank's story is a reminder that learning and growth don't stop at any age.
I love that it's so empowering. It's like even though certain aspects of our lives might change, we still have this capacity to create new connections, explore new interests, find joy in these unexpected places.
Absolutely. Adaptability is all about being open to new experiences, remaining curious, and adjusting our sails as life takes us on new
and it's not
adventures.
about becoming someone different. It's about evolving with the times and embracing the opportunities that come our way.
I love that. And so I'm curious, as we kind of wrap up our exploration of these 6 pillars, how have you had to adapt to changes in your own life? Have there been any unexpected opportunities that kind of arose from having to adjust to something
That's such a good
new?
question. I think for me, one of the biggest changes was when my kids moved out. It was bittersweet, of course, but it also opened up this space for me to reconnect with some of my own creative passion. I started writing again, which eventually led to this podcast. And it's brought so much meaning and connection into my life. And it's just amazing how one change can kind of ripple out and create something so unexpected.
What a beautiful example of adaptability in action. It's such a good reminder that change, even when it's challenging, can lead to incredible growth
This
and
whole
new
conversation
beginnings.
has been so insightful, and I love how each pillar kind of builds on the others. It creates this holistic framework for living a really fulfilling and supported life after 60.
It really is like weaving this tapestry of support, with each thread representing a different aspect of our well-being. And the beauty of it is that we have the power to choose the colors, the textures, the patterns that make up our own unique
So well
tapestry.
said. It's not about passively accepting whatever life throws at us. It's about actively creating a life that feels, authentic and meaningful and supportive.
It's amazing, isn't it? I used to think of support as something that came mainly from outside of myself, but family, friends, community. This deep dive has really shifted my perspective on the importance of cultivating that support from
Absolutely.
within.
It's like we've been saying, it's not an either situation. It's one or the other. It's about having both. Those external connections and that strong internal foundation. And that's really what allows us to be resilient and, navigate the ups and downs of life, especially as we get older.
For sure. So let's do a quick recap of the 6 pillars that we've been unpacking. We started with
This
financial
idea that having our
stability.
finances in order provides this baseline sense of security so we can make choices from a place of empowerment, not out of necessity. Then we talked about physical health, emphasizing how important it is to take care of our bodies as an act of self-respect, and how even those small, consistent efforts can have a huge impact on our well-being and independence as we get older. And then we talked about creating that, vibrant social circle, reminding ourselves that connection is not just, a nice to have, it's actually vital for our emotional and even physical health. And it's about, actively nurturing those relationships that bring us joy and seeking out new ones that align with our interests. And oh my gosh, how could we forget purpose? This idea that even as our roles and responsibilities change, we can still find so much meaning and fulfillment by pursuing those things that light us up, whether it's hobbies or learning, mentoring, anything that gives us that get up and go energy. Then we talked about emotional resilience, which sometimes gets overlooked, but is so important. It's that ability to bounce back from challenges, to process those difficult emotions in healthy ways, and to find that inner strength, to move through life's ups and downs. And then finally, adaptability. This understanding that change is constant and that our ability to kind of adapt and evolve is what allows us not just to survive, but to thrive as we move through different chapters.
I love
Right.
that, different
It's
chapters.
remarkable how these 6 pillars, while they seem kind of separate on the surface, are actually so interconnected. It's like
They are.
weaving this tapestry of support, where each thread kind of strengthens and complements the others.
And you know what I love about it? Is that it puts the power
Totally.
back in our hands. It reminds us that we're not just passive passengers, active creators.
Yes, we have choices. Right, we get to choose
choices.
how we respond to challenges, how we cultivate our support systems, and
Yes.
ultimately how we want to experience this chapter of our lives.
The video ends with this line that I love, and it stayed with me. It said, by focusing on these 6 pillars, we're not just preparing for the future, we're actively creating a life where we feel empowered and supported no matter what comes
Isn't that
our way.
amazing? It's so empowering.
is.
It's like we don't have to wait for support to come find us. We can actively build it within ourselves and our lives. Yeah.
It's a call to action. It's an invitation to take ownership of our well-being and create a life that really feels aligned with, our values or
I
passions
am feeling
or dreams.
so inspired after this conversation. Thank you
Me
so
too.
much for joining me on this deep dive. It's been such a rich and thought-provoking conversation.
The pleasure was all mine, honestly. I always love exploring these topics that really, encourage us to think differently about how we live and
And
age.
to our listeners out there, thank you so much for being here. We hope this deep dive has sparked some new ideas and insights for you. And if you're feeling inspired, we'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts,
Absolutely.
your takeaways, maybe even some of the ways you're already cultivating these pillars in your own life.
Remember, even small steps can make a big difference
So
over
true.
time.
It's about progress, not perfection.
That's
Thanks
it.
again for being here, and until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep into those topics that matter most to you.